We spoke earlier in the show briefly about social care, one of the major issues that the government's grappling with. We're approaching Boris Johnson's 2-year anniversary, as I said a moment ago, which means it's almost 2 years since he pledged to fix the problem once and for all. But unless we've all missed the memo, no plan has actually emerged, so others have stepped in to fill the void. And one of those is Damian Green, the former Deputy Prime Minister, who's backing a new plan announced today. Mr. Green joins us now. Damian Green, just before we get on to your plan on social care, can I just ask you, Ashford, which is your constituency, is the main station on the way to France, if you're going by train. Are you convinced that the quarantine requirement about France, even for people who are double jabbed, is absolutely necessary?
I can see the reasons for it, and sadly, we're not the main stop at the moment because Eurostar traffic is down so much that they're only running services from London at the moment, so it has no direct effect on my constituency. What will have an effect is getting travel back normally as fast as possible so they can reopen their full services.
But it's part of a general point, isn't it, that actually the balance between what the local government secretary described as caution or being precautionary and getting the economy going again, has the government got this right, do you think?
I think the French decision is reasonable. I think sometimes when you have to take decisions quickly, shortly before they come into effect, that causes problems for people. But I think this sort of old debate about the balance between the economy and infections is a slightly false one, in that what we all want, particularly what business wants, is some kind of certainty that when you take an unlocking step, that you're not going to reverse that later on. And what we've learned throughout this pandemic is that a degree of caution for a time is worth it, because that makes it easier and more sensible to unlock permanently for the future. But we're, as everyone says, we're not out of the woods yet. The infections are rising as they're expected to do. I think it is a good idea to continue with Monday's unlocking, because, as Chris Whitty said, if not now, when? This is the best time of year to do that. But nobody should think we're on a sort of one-way path to unlocking if we don't all continue to behave responsibly.
OK, let's talk about your proposals in relation to social care. What is different from what you want to do, from what Sir Andrew Dilnot proposed, that set a cap, for example, on what we'd each have to spend at about £50,000?
The big difference in this report from Public Policy Projects is that instead of having a flat cap of say, £50,000, we suggest that it should be a percentage of your assets. Now, for most people's assets, that's broadly speaking their house. And the reason why having a flat number is difficult to implement, it's why the Dilnot proposals have never been implemented, is that it has widely different effects in different parts of the country. In parts of the country where house prices are much lower, then £50,000 will take a significant chunk out of your estate. In other parts of the country, it won't. So it's geographically unfair if you just have a flat number. If you have a percentage figure, say that you can, wherever you are in the country, keep 70% of your assets, we think that's fairer and therefore more politically palatable for a decision which is going to be difficult. Whatever means you try and raise the money, it's difficult because people are going to have to pay more than we have done in the past, because the social care system is underfunded to the tune of something between 7 and 10 billion a year.
So, first point, to be clear, you are now essentially accepting that in order to fund social care, people are going to have to sell their homes.
No, I'm not. Absolutely not. That's the whole point, because if you can keep a measurable percentage of your assets, then you won't have to sell your home. You can buy an insurance policy or something like that, maybe using features like equity release so that you can actually use the value of your home but not have to sell it. And I think the difference between the PPP proposal and the Dilnot proposal is that everyone will know that one of the examples we use in the report is 70%, that 70% of their inheritance, if you like, is guaranteed for their children or their family, whereas under Dilnot, the percentage that you might be able to pass on is wildly different in different parts of the country.
Well, let's just examine this point about fairness, and I wonder if you could explain it for us, because the average London householder under your proposals would still have, whether they take out insurance or they borrow, or whatever it is, they'd still have £337,000 in the kitty after hitting your proposed cap, compared to someone in the North East who'd have just £92,000. And someone in your own constituency, Ashford, would be left with £140,000. How is that fairer?
Yeah, I did the calculations on the basis of Ashford versus Hartlepool. And in my constituency, the average house price is 370,000. In Hartlepool, it's 130,000. If you have a 50, 60, 70,000 pound cap, all the sort of figures that have been mentioned, then in Hartlepool, you're losing more than half your inheritance. In Ashford, you're losing a much smaller proportion. And
but you're still left with a lot more actual money.
Well, but because for the way the housing system works, and there's a whole other argument to be had about planning, but the way the housing system works, it just means you are when you're alive, you have a lot more wealth, you have a lot more asset, just because the same house in different parts of the country is worth different things. Now, to solve that requires a lot of change about planning and indeed levelling up, so that house prices go up in other parts of the country because they become places where people want to move to. But that's a longer term thing. In the meantime, what you can do now is to say, wherever you are in the country, you get to keep the same percentage of your assets, so that you will know roughly what your house is worth, and therefore, if you're thinking about what can I leave to my children, then you will know that you've got the bulk of that to leave.
You've been in Number 10 for quite some time as Deputy Prime Minister. You were a minister in other departments. Has the Prime Minister made the right judgment today to work from Number 10 under this pilot scheme, to which it appears every cabinet minister has access and hardly anybody else does? Well,
it's not clear who's got access to it. But yeah, I mean, I think in practical terms, allowing the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer to work as normally as possible is actually quite sensible. And I hope one of the effects of this is to accelerate the pilot scheme, and indeed the analysis of the pilot scheme, because this might be a way out of the current problems of people not being able to go to work. I think the sooner we get to that, the better, and clearly daily testing is one way to achieve that. So I'd be very keen if we could move to a system where if you have been in contact with someone but you're showing no symptoms, and as far as you know you haven't got it, then regular testing should replace isolation. I think that would be a significant unlocking step, and it would be very welcome.
Damian Green, thank you very much indeed.